Hi, I'm going to talk about right now how glucose and insulin levels affect the body. I'm going to keep this very basic, and I think I should be able to explain it without getting anybody lost. So first of all, I'm going to draw a cell right here. Any kind of a cell in the body. Could be a muscle cell, a heart cell, a kidney cell, whatever. A muscle cell will make your muscles move. So let's say it's just a muscle cell. And on the side, there's a little receptor here for insulin. Here's an insulin molecule. We'll call that insulin like that. And over here is a blood vessel. So here's a blood vessel with blood, and here's a cell, a muscle cell. Inside, you're going to have a meal to eat. You're going to have sugar or glucose levels in the bloodstream. So there's a G, glucose. That's a sugar molecule. It's all in the bloodstream floating around. It's not doing the cell any good right now until that sugar level gets inside the cell. Once inside that cell, that glucose is going to burn and give that cell energy so we could move, for instance. Just like a car does. When you put fuel in the engine, it'll burn that fuel up so we can make the pistons move and the car moves. The same thing like in the cell. That the glucose or the sugar acts like the fuel. Once it gets inside the cell burns it so we can make some movements. So what happens is you have a meal. The glucose is in the bloodstream right now. The pancreas says, hey, let's make some insulin because we have some sugar now. So the pancreas makes some insulin. Insulin floats all over the place, and it actually comes here and it binds to the cell wall. So now you have the insulin right here. Once that insulin attaches to the cell, it makes a chain reaction where first thing it does, it'll say, okay, let's open up the floodgates right here. Let's open that up. And so the glucose, the sugar, comes right inside the cell. Once that sugar is inside the cell, it makes the cell do its job. So it'll burn off all that glucose. And what's ever left over is going to get stored, I'm going to put it right over here, as fat. So that fat is going to be nice compacted in the corner. It's going to keep that fat right there, so when we need it, when there's no glucose, when there's no sugar coming in, that fat can be converted into a free fatty acid. Well, what that is, that's just like glucose. It's like sugar, a little different, but it acts the same way. That will burn that fat and use that for energy. So it's another energy source. When the sugar levels drop in the bloodstream, the insulin will come away, will dissipate. That'll break down, and now the cell will start burning this fat, and the fat molecules will come out and go into the bloodstream and fuel other cells so they can do their thing. So that's how, basically on a cellular level, very simplistic, how insulin affects the body. With insulin, we accept the glucose so the cell can burn it and collect fat, so when we need it for later. It can't burn fat until the insulin leaves. When the insulin leaves, then we can burn the fat. Okay, so now let's draw a little graph here. Here's a graph, and this is time. Time's going to go on here. And I'll take, let's call this blood glucose, the sugar in green, and insulin in red. Okay? And right here, we're going to have a meal. It's breakfast time, let's say. Red Blood American is going to have a bowl of cereal with milk, banana on top, yogurt, sweetened yogurt, Dannon yogurt, and orange juice, cup of coffee. That's a very high glycemic breakfast, by the way. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what happens is our sugar levels of glucose, sugar level is going to go screaming up here. And the pancreas says, okay, we have some sugar here, let's make some insulin so the glucose can come inside the cell. So the insulin levels come up like this. And now all of that glucose comes in the cell and the cell is burning it off. It's being used. We're exercising, we're playing golf, we're playing with the kids. So now all that glucose comes in and the sugar levels, the blood glucose levels, come right back down. So what happens now, the insulin that's here, it's a big molecule. It's a long chain molecule that doesn't break down too fast. It takes a long time for insulin to break down. So that starts to drop, but slowly, more like this. So now, right at this point, we have low sugar, high insulin. We have low sugar, high insulin. But since our sugar levels are low in the middle of the morning, we're getting kind of hungry. So what do? Well, I'm going to have a cup of coffee and a donut, maybe 2 donuts, whatever. A lot of the secretaries will have rice cake and a latte. Rice cake, very high glycemic. It's all sugar, believe it or not. So what happens? The sugar levels go screaming up. So now we have a lot of glucose. And then, so the pancreas says, hey, we have to make more insulin. So insulin levels come up. And now the sugar comes in, does its job. Later on, a couple hours later, it's lunchtime. Sugar levels drop. Let's have a, I don't know, pasta. I'm going to have some spaghetti and a couple of slices of garlic bread, sweetened iced tea. What's going to happen? Sugar levels come way up. The insulin levels are dropped from before, but much lower level. Same thing. So now we live on like this, and you can see how your day unfolds. Very high and low sugar drops, and then the insulin levels come down, but then we eat, so it's always up high, higher levels. This causes a lot of inflammation in our body, degenerative diseases, all the aging that we spoke about, high insulin levels, high glucose levels, cause a lot of inflammation in our bodies, our heart disease, heart attacks, stroke, obesity, retinal disease in the eye, kidney failure, lack of blood supply to our extremities, to our feet and hands, and that's where you get an amputation sometimes with diabetics. That's because high sugar and high insulin levels cause all that to happen. Now, let's go back to tomorrow. Tomorrow is a new day. We're going to start off with a different breakfast, okay? We're going to have 3-egg omelet with low-fat cheese. Throw in some vegetables. I like asparagus with mine. A little bit of olive oil on it, okay? So what happens, that's a low glycemic breakfast. It doesn't have a lot of sugar in it. So the sugar levels come up, but not at this rate. It just comes up gradually, like this. And then, so the body says, okay, insulin, we have sugar, let's make some insulin. Well, this is just going to match what the sugar levels are. And since we had a low sugar content breakfast, it's going to stay around longer. The vegetables are going to burn off, but at a much slower rate, because it has to break down the cellulose. It has to distribute the fibers from digestible and undigestible fibers. It takes a long time. It'll release its sugar, but it takes a few hours, up to 2-3 hours for that to happen. So it's going to stick around a while, that sugar. And the insulin levels are just at the same rate. It's going to drop the same way, at the same rate. Here we're going to skip that mid-morning snack because we don't feel hungry. We don't have this sugar dropping. We don't have that spike that comes down. So we're not that hungry. We're more energetic. We get more work done. And food's not even on our mind right now. But it finally drops at lunchtime. Okay, so now for lunch, we're going to have a piece of chicken and a salad. Okay, so now the sugar levels will come up, but not that high. It'll come up like this, And the insulin will of course follow that same way. And eventually, several hours later, it comes down towards dinner time. And so does the insulin. Okay, so now for dinner, we're going to have a piece of salmon and a cup of broccoli. Oh, okay. So the blood sugar comes up. I got the colors mixed up before. And the insulin levels come up, but it's at a much lower rate. So, as you can see right here, right about halfway mark. If we can keep our levels of blood sugar and insulin below this level, we're going to be much healthier. We're not going to have these spikes. You're going to feel more energetic. And with the insulin levels low, insulin is no longer here, so now this fat will continue to burn. You have these free fatty acids go, so you're going to be burning more fat. And you're going to feel better. You're going to be burning fat, you're going to get lighter. And so what happens at nighttime, you go to bed, you're going to be burning fat all night long because your insulin levels are low, allowing the fat to burn. So you're going to wake up a little bit lighter. And after a few days in a row, you're going to have your pants are going to feel not so tight, and you're going to feel more comfortable. And you keep doing that, and you can lose more and more weight. You can have the energy to do the things you want to do, and all this degenerative diseases are going to slow down because your sugar and glucose and insulin levels are lower. You're not going to have all these problems that a lot of diabetics have. We're still going to age, but at a much lower rate. As a matter of fact, at this level, they say a human will live 10 to 15 years longer with lower levels of sugar and insulin. Healthy years, not sickly years. You can be healthy all over. So that's how that works. And I hope I explained it well.